Good evening. Great.
Ah, they will be recording. Okay. All right. Okay. I can see now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our panel talk titled Entrepreneurs in Innovation Centers. We are super excited to be invited to this session today. It was a big pleasure that my colleagues, peers accepted the invitation. Among their busy schedule, they took off today, and thanks for coming, all of you. I am Estimize. I am a senior architect, specialized in user experience and product design. And my previous colleague from CA Technologies, Debra Danielson, senior vice president. Tanya Kravtsov. She's director of Audible, Amazon. Christine Short from Estimize. And Meltem Dincer is from John Wiley and Sons publisher. I will briefly introduce myself, how I get into technology field. And then each speaker will be introducing themselves and will be telling their background. And after one round, everyone introduced, we will move on to questions related to their innovation experience in their career, working with organizations. We are all entrepreneurs here. We all work for organizations. We all have technology background as education. I have computer engineering background, then from Turkey actually. I was born and grew up in Turkey and earned my BS in computer engineering. Then I moved to US for my PhD in industrial engineering. I specialize in computer-human interaction. So I have a thesis in expert systems, artificial intelligence in cockpit systems. My first job is with Bell Labs. I joined as a human factors engineer. And after a couple of years in Bell Labs, I moved to AT&T Labs. So they are brothers, sisters companies. Then Lucent Technologies. I have 9 years among all these 3 different companies, always with technology organizations. So in 2004, I moved to CA Technologies as a senior UI designer. And I work for CA Technologies about 9 years. And 3 years ago, I moved to a small startup, but it's been in the history for a long time. But they became startup, different history. If you guys are curious about SyncSort, they have a unique history being in the technology about 40 years, but they are still startup. So I've been working there for 3 years as a senior architect specialized in next-gen product design. Debra, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Debra Danielson. I am currently Senior Vice President, Mergers and Acquisition Strategy, and one of CA's distinguished engineers. There are about 11 of us right now in the company. I actually started my career out at a company called ADR, Applied Data Research, which had the distinction of holding the very first patent ever granted in software. It's long expired by now, but CA acquired ADR about 5 years after I started working for it, so that means that CA actually sort of owns as part of its legacy that very first software patent. I was hired in QA. And I actually didn't really have much intention when I got started in my career of a career in technology. I actually wanted to be in the financial services industry, but I put my application into ADR because it was nearby, and I got a job as in QA. And about 6 weeks after I started there, I decided that the developers were having a lot more fun than QA was. And so I started going to the developers and saying, hey, can I do that for you? Can I do that for you? And after about 2 months, the manager of the group came to me and said they were going to hire another QA person. They were moving me over into development because I wasn't getting any QA work done. It's interesting. I've been with CA Technologies for a really long time, but it's been like working for about 7 or 8 different companies because of all of the technology sort of revolutions that have taken place over time. And I will say that one of the things that is really a key to the progression of my career is a willingness to contradict the conventional thinking and to object to what the current trajectory is. And all of the sort of key inflection points in my career have centered around me sort of standing up and saying, no, you're wrong, particularly when standing up and saying, no, you're wrong to my boss or my boss's boss. So I think that that's an incredibly important thing when it comes to innovation, is to be willing to look at something and say the emperor's not wearing any clothes.
Hi, my name is Tanya Kravtsov, and around a month ago I joined Audible as a director of QA. Actually, my story is a bit of the opposite, where my background and education are in computer science. I received bachelor in computer science from Stony Brook and then master's from Stevens University. I was planning to be in web development, and my first job was supposed to be there, and I accidentally ended up in QA. Really wanted to move out back to development if possible, but I actually fell in love with QA, at least the automation portion of it. So I wasn't too happy testing manually, but once I discovered that you can actually code and test the product, that became my passion, and I've been doing it for the past 15 years. So first 10 years of my career I spent in financial industry, working for Morgan Stanley, UBS. I liked working there, but at some point I started feeling that I'm too far away from the end customer, and I moved into product industry and never looked back. I worked at SyncSort with Essen, and I helped to build a new QA organization there. Then I made the decision to join a brand new startup, so I was there. I was the first person in the company working with the founders, building out a whole new organization, which was very exciting. But at some point, having 2 kids at home, I realized that this is something that maybe I can do later on in my career. So now I moved to Audible, and again, I'm actually building out a new QA organization there, which, as we mentioned, we are intrapreneurs in a sense that, when you build a new organization, it's all about innovation. Coming out with new solutions and trying to solve problems at the company by bringing a new team and new processes in place.
Hi, I'm Christine Shore. I am a Senior Vice President at Estimize, which is a crowdsourcing platform for financial data. My background's a little bit different from everyone on the panel because I actually don't have a technology background and actually actively avoided any sort of math and science for most of my life. I think, a lot of women like myself were always very scared, didn't think I was very good at it. So instead, I got my bachelor's in journalism and international relations, thought I was going to be the next Christiane Amanpour. Lo and behold, I graduate and I get a job in finance, which was, I always called myself a masochist because I'm like, okay, join the cross-country team. I, work in finance. Like, these are all things that I hate. But then after doing them for a while, found I actually sort of liked them. So my first job was with Thomson Reuters. I worked on the research team, which was sort of filled my craving to write. I didn't think I'd like writing about finance, but I turned it into something that I really actually loved. Part of that was using data to kind of determine the health of certain companies. A lot of those companies were in tech, and I think was the first time learning about tech companies, the products they were producing, the innovation, where I really decided, hey, you know what, I don't have a technology background, but I have an interest here. That then led me to Standard & Poor's Capital IQ, which considers itself more of a tech-based company. And there is where I really feel like I became an intrapreneur, because they had this same estimates data set that I was using at Thomson Reuters, but it wasn't well known. Thomson Reuters was the standard, so I had to come to a company with a data set with a great brand. Standard & Poor's is obviously very well recognized, but no one knew we had this data. And so I had to go out and build a whole, not only the client acquisition plan for the sales team, but also how are we going to get journalists to write about us? So, they were all shutting me out, like, oh, we already got that data. And so I had to build this grassroots campaign about how to get recognition for this data set. And I found I love the autonomy. that intrapreneurship led to a bit of entrepreneurship. I started my own company. I always say it kind of started because of Hurricane Sandy. I know that was a tragic event, but our office shut down for 4 months, and I had to hop around to different coffee shops with one particular colleague of mine. We were both interested in starting something. So in 2013, we started a company called Suit and Suite. And you can think of it as the Rent the Runway for business attire. So we were interested in helping young women right out of college who couldn't afford suits, dresses to wear to career fairs and interviews, have access to those things, as well as career counseling, resume writing, and all of that. Anyone that's tried to start a company or knows someone who has, it's very difficult. And so the motto is always fail fast. So it's really hard to admit to a failure, but to this day, when I've gone on interviews, it's the number one thing people want to hear about is my 1-year failed startup that I did in conjunction with another job. So never mind all of the other job experience I've had. I go on TV regularly. I talk about markets, but that would be the one thing that they'd focus in on. So my advice would be, if you're interested in starting something, definitely do it, because if it doesn't work out, it's definitely a great stepping stone, and it makes you a more interesting applicant for sure. So, after that startup kind of failed, I realized I need to be in a startup where, there's a foundation and I can learn how to begin my own company because I have no clue what I'm doing. And that's what got me to Estimize. And so, like I said, we're a crowdsourcing platform. We allow anyone, not just professionals, but non-professionals, to come on and give their estimates for certain publicly traded companies and how they think they're going to do on a quarterly basis. And through this job, it is a startup, and so I've kind of taken on the role again of an intrapreneur. So not only do I just run content strategy and sort of our PR strategy, but all of us are involved in product design and, is this intuitive? And so the thing I love about being in a small company is having an opinion on every piece of the business. And so we all get to come together, and we actually just got back from Vail, Colorado. It was half fun skiing and half brainstorming, getting all 20 of us together and deciding, what products we're going to build over the next year and what we're going to get rid of. So yeah, I guess I'm back at square one of intrapreneurship, but I'm doing this to hopefully start my own company again at some point, once I've learned a little more.
Okay, this is very interesting, because my first job here was at Institutional Brokers Estimate System, IBEST, which was the database in Thomson Reuters.
Yes,
IBEST. Yes, there you go. So I also am from Turkey. I have a degree in electrical engineering, and the reason I have a degree in electrical engineering is because my father was a nuclear physicist, and he was in universities and academia all his life. I loved math, and I wanted to go study math, and he said to me, "What are you going to do studying math? Look at me, I've got nothing. Go do something else." I said, "Okay, then could I do computers?" Because it was very new back then. And he said, "What are you going to do studying computers? You can always learn how to program. Go learn what's inside a computer first, and then you can learn how to program." I said, "Okay, why not?" And electrical engineering was the highest possible score you could possibly get into in Turkey. So I got in. Hated it for 3-4 years. And I did take a Pascal course during my tenure, and then I fell in love with programming. It made so much sense. The world was so orderly, and you could do so many things. Anyway, so I did move here and got a master's degree in computer science, and I was just applying to get PhDs. I got 3 job offers, and I accepted one. It was a consulting at IBEST, and we were going to move them from mainframe back down into client services developer, 23, 24. So I learned one piece of the system. It was a massive effort. They've been at it as part of a consulting group. They've been at it for a few years. So I learned one piece of the system in a month. And then to Debra's point, I questioned why this was written this way. This is not the orderly universe that I've learned in programming. This is a mess. Could I change it? Could I change that? So I changed that piece, and then they moved me to another piece. They moved me to another piece. At the end of 1 year, I was the only one in the 35 people consulting group who actually knew every single piece of the system. Everybody else was focused. Consultants were costing so much money, so the IBEST decided to get rid of the consultants, and they actually offered me a job to manage their applications development team. I was so young, I didn't know what to do with that, but I accepted it. Very scared, managing 5 people who were much older than me. Did okay, lost a lot of sleep, but did okay. And IBIS got acquired by Primark. Primark got acquired by some other company, and then eventually we got acquired by Thomson Financial. And again, similar to, I think, Debra's career, I stayed in Thomson Financial for about 20 years, doing a different job every 3 years. So I moved from content technology to software development. I ran software development for investment management systems for years. And Thomson Financial acquired 41 organizations in their history, and then they moved from 41 to 4 to 2 to 1. So we've gone through very painful reorganization, restructuring efforts over 5-6 years. And as part of all that, I literally did a 360 at Thomson Reuters. Even did like 3 years in Switzerland as an asset manager and an individual contributor, which actually was a life changer for me. That taught me that you could get a lot of stuff done in an organization without having people directly reporting into you. That taught me how to influence, how to get other people to do stuff for you, even though they don't have to. It was a great learning experience. I also did a lot of the core technology as part of that. So moved from specific product verticals into corporate. Huge experience at Thomson Reuters. About a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, my previous manager moved to John Wiley and Sons, and he called me, and I followed him. Not because I followed him, but John Wiley actually fascinated me. This is where I am right now. I'm the vice president in charge of platform capabilities. The reason I was hired was to figure out their smart content strategy, because the publishing industry is very behind in technology. They're still very print-based. We published, majority of our business is publishing journals, scientific journals. So they hired me to figure out their strategy, and I turned the strategy into execution this year, and I'll tell you more about it when we get there.
Very interesting stories, very interesting backgrounds. So these young ladies have a lot to tell you today, but our time is very limited. We already spent our 15 minutes. So another 15 minutes, we will be talking about some innovation, startup stories, success or failure, interesting ones. So before I turn to Debra, I would like to summarize what I read about history of innovation. You guys might know about it, but I find it very interesting. I thought that I should share with you guys. The history of innovation, kind of, there is before web mainstream and after web mainstream. So I find it very interesting when you think about it. There is a pattern, they call it 10 plus 10 for many technology areas, innovation. It's kind of like 10 years from ideation research till it becomes first shipment in the market. That takes mostly 10 years average. And after the first ship of market, another 10 years that it becomes adopted by all the users. So they call it 10 plus 10. And that is actually approved by cell phones, approved by GPS devices, approved by personal computers. It's very interesting. I didn't know when I was reading, I was going back and deep diving, so I don't have time to share all details here. But my specialization is the graphical user interface. I will share that with you here. The first graphical user interface demo was done in 1970 at Xerox. And it took 10 years to ship to the market first time in 1981. And 1984, Macintosh came with the graphical user interface. Until 1990, Microsoft Windows 3.0, it wasn't adapted fully. So another 10 years. So the entire graphical user interface innovation history is 20 years. It's amazing. Like when I was like, is it true? But it is true, 20 years. So, but what happened after web? For example, YouTube, right? So they decided in 2005, former PayPal online systems colleagues, they decided to use web mainstream to make this video uploading and sharing easy. instead of using QuickTime or Flash or Microsoft Player, which was making a lot difficult to upload and share, they decided, why not we bring sound and video capabilities into web environment. They founded the company February 2005. They sold the company in 2006 to Google, 1.6 billion. In 2 years, research, first shipment, and adapted. So in 2006, they had 30 million streaming videos per hour or something like that. It was amazing, like how easily got adapted by the users. I thought that it is fascinating, and we all have some history in the organizations, working different parts of the organizations. So now we would like to share some of the stories with you from our perspective, from our jobs. So I will return it to Debra.
Great, thanks, Essen. Yeah, you know what I really wanted to talk about here is I've had a lot of different initiatives over my career, and some of them have been successful, and some of them have been unsuccessful. I've learned something from every single one of them, whether they are successful or unsuccessful. Sometimes the things that I learned from the unsuccessful ones are actually more valuable than the things that I learned from the successful ones. One of the things that I really learned is that having the idea is 2% of being successful in terms of innovation, right? Not only do you have to have the idea, you have to have a solution that actually works. That's a really big step from having the idea. And then you need to have the market ready for your solution to actually be accepted and adopted. And then the last thing is you actually have to be able to execute on it, and you have to be able to make it into a business. Getting all four of those things together is really what it takes to do successful innovation. And if you're missing any one of those, it doesn't work. Like one of the earlier innovations I was involved with, this was back in actually 1985. I was working on a system that was doing context-sensitive multimedia help embedded into mainframe software systems, right? So, you would be working in your mainframe software system, and you would press a help button, and up would come a little window with a video overlay on it, which would have some expert in the field talking about what you needed to know or understand at that point in time. You look at that today, and that's sort of a common part of the work that we do today, and a common part of our environment. But back in 1985, it cost about $25,000 to own the equipment to run that system. And even though it was a great idea, the solution was wrong, the market timing was wrong, and our execution on it was wrong. And so it was unsuccessful. I learned a lot, but it was unsuccessful.
Excellent. Tanya.
So the story of innovation that I wanted to share is not actually a standard story of innovation, but it's more about how sometimes innovation can come out from very unusual situations. And in my case, it came out at the most critical times when I was struggling to find the balance between work and personal life, which I think maybe some people can relate to. So when I was a hands-on developer, automation engineer at Morgan Stanley, I got pregnant with my daughter. I was very stressed about it, and in order to find a way to release that stress, I decided to spend my time studying for a PMP. So I spent my whole pregnancy studying for PMP. I took the exam when I was 8 months pregnant, and that's how I moved into a leadership role. And that was like the first example. Then I went to work in New Jersey, and I wanted to continue self-developing. I had 2 little kids at home. I didn't have time to travel to New York. And all the great meetups and conferences were usually taking place in New York City. And I got very interested in the field of DevOps, and I couldn't find anything related to DevOps in New Jersey. So I started out my own meetup, which is called DevOps QA for New Jersey, and started inviting speakers from New York. And this way I was able to satisfy my own need to learn more about this topic, and also gave an opportunity to people who work and live in New Jersey to develop in that space. And that's what I feel like. Balancing work and life is an art. And sometimes innovation and success can actually come out from the need to do that.
Excellent.
Yeah, so my innovation story, it's more about the innovation that I'm interested in right now and kind of how I discovered what's going on in the fintech scene in New York. While I was at S&P and using this data and writing a lot of the content, a conversation that would typically come up was, well, here's estimates for corporations, but they're always wrong. Like Wall Street has all of these inherent biases when they give estimates. So you'd be giving journalists a number that you knew was typically going to be 3% off by the time the company actually reported because of these inherent biases. And so I started thinking like, what good is a number if I'm always saying like give or take 3%? Like it was never really indicative of how the company was going to perform. And through my search, I found Estimize, which I said crowdsources these estimates because Wall Street isn't the only half of the market that's participating. There are non-professionals and individuals that are investing, and the only way to have efficient markets is to have more democratized information. So I'm really interested in the fintech companies that are democratizing information and making it available not just to the institutions that can afford it and buy it and the people that can buy it, but for everyone, because again, markets aren't efficient if only some people have the right information. And then I realized there was this whole, like I said, I started out thinking I hated finance, but then I realized there was this whole boom of fintech in this city to the point where we're almost taking over Silicon Valley as far as growth and investments goes year over year. There are companies, and I almost think of it as David versus Goliath, because finance is such a huge, stodgy, non-innovative industry that no one has dared to touch for years and years. And in the last 5 years, there are companies that have come around that pay everything or have changed everything from how we pay, how many people use Square Cash or Venmo or PayPal, to how we borrow, to how we get our information. Even everything around social media I find so interesting because there are a ton of companies now that cull data from social media to tell you whether or not to buy a stock. So during the winter, how many people are tweeting about how much they love their Uggs? Is it a positive tweet? Is it negative? And what does that mean? Should you invest in it? So there are so many companies doing innovative things, and this is not low-hanging fruit. Like I said, they're taking on the big guys. And a lot of the big guys have just sort of rolled over. I mean, if you look at the investments big banks have made in small fintech companies, they're buying them up left and right because they know they can't innovate at that pace. So they'd rather just buy something that is already developed. And as far as, at Estimize, like I said, we're trying to democratize information. We are a completely open and free platform. We want everyone to have the data they need to make successful investments. Part of having accurate information is being representative. And this is where my plea comes in. We don't have enough women on the site that actually contribute. We have so many women in our community that look at the data, that read our research, that interact with us. But when we've done surveys, more often than not, women say, well, I don't think I know enough. But they know enough that they're on the site and they're reading about stuff. They're reading about Apple. They shop at Kohl's. Like, everyone knows something. Everyone here is a consumer. So everyone knows something about companies and how they think they're going to perform. We also know from studies that women are actually better investors than men. Portfolios run by women return 1% more than those run by men. So again, to create an efficient market and to democratize information and make the most representative data set ever, we need the other half of those people that are investing. So go to estimize.com and leave your estimates.
Great. Meltem.
Okay, I think I'll use my latest experience with this one, which I'm still living through. I think two things about innovation for me. One is sometimes what you end up with is not what you started with. So sometimes you start with an idea and it evolves over time and you learn so much along the way and you end up with something somehow resembling what you started with but different. So as I said, in my case, I was hired to figure out a smart content strategy. So I started at my job and first month asking around everybody, what do you mean by this? And what do you think I'm going to do for you? And what smart content meant was different for everybody. At the heart of it, it was make your content more granular, get it out of the books, metadata, enrichment, semantics, and all that stuff. But over the 6 months, what I realized was the problem was not figuring out how to take the content out of a book and make it smart. The problem was actually creating a brand new publishing pathway for the industry and for the company, and that starts all the way from how you author content and all the way down to how you actually produce products. So we ended up with moving away from smart content strategy and building actually a brand new Wiley publishing platform, and hence my job title has changed just about last week. I also went from having 4 people just to figure out strategy to an entire organization to actually build a platform. So you have to be able to, I think, adapt at what you learn, talk to your businesses, talk to your customers. Technology is never about technology. There's always cool technology, but it's always about what problems you solve. And one interesting problem to solve at Wiley, which is a long term, which also fascinates me, is the users. Wiley has been around for 208 years, actually. It used to publish Edgar Allan Poe, Charles Dickinson, Melville. When Wiley was founded, I think there were 13 states in the Union, and Napoleon was still in power.
Wow.
It went through Industrial Revolution, it went through Great Depression, it went through 2 world wars, and it innovated. So now publishing industry is at a crossroads. So it can't keep up with the technology, it hasn't been able to keep up with technology. So demographics of the users are very, very different. So your 70-year-old college professor who wants you to read this particular book is very different from the 30-year college professor who's actually posting selfies of his classroom into social media. So we're trying to figure out what that is and what that means. And what I'm finding, the second thing I wanted to talk about is it's very hard. Once you have an idea in your head, it makes perfect sense for you. And you can go through how you'll execute it, how you'd scale it, how you implement it. Explaining what you have in your head and convincing people that you actually have a solution worked out, they can trust you, is a challenge, especially in our industry where people are used to planning for a published book, where you have to actually know every single page, every single chapter, table of index, table of contents, because once you print, you can't change it. The biggest challenge for technology in the publishing industry is to say that it is okay to have a release 1. There will always be a release 2, a release 3, a release 4. If you don't get that number right in that page, you can always do another release. So that's what I'm going through right now, but our entire actually business is not just innovation within the company, but innovation in the industry, the publishing industry at all as well.
Great. All stories are great. Our time is up. They just warned me. We had a couple of more questions to go, but I think we have a social hour, so you guys are welcome to talk to our speakers. So one thing I want to add, if you are at the beginning of your career as a technologist, the most important thing is find a mentor. It's the most important thing. If you want to be successful, find a mentor that you can follow, that will be role model for you. If you're a student, find a mentor in the school, your college professors. If you are in the technology, find a mentor who has been around for some time. Experience is very important. So that's how I find my way. I hope you guys enjoy our talk. So again, if you have any questions before they come and take the microphones, I think you can ask. We are time up, but it's any questions? Yes.
What's the biggest challenge for you as an entrepreneur? Because a lot of you have started your own business, I say, within your own company. And I've heard about the struggles of an entrepreneur, which is getting funding, getting people to go with your vision. I imagine there's similar struggles. Like I personally am going through a struggle at my company to get internal funding. What are some of the struggles you've had and also the successes? Tips?
I think for me in the past, it's been getting other people on board with my vision, like you said, getting the funding to, support a new effort, having other people see eye to you. It depends. When I was in a larger corporation, that was certainly a lot more difficult. to get everyone on board and to change the strategy because Standard & Poor's is a very old company, so it was hard to sort of innovate and get people to want to try more things and take risks, but the budget was there. And now at a startup I have the opposite issue, which is that it's easier to make your case to my team. Everyone's sort of forward thinking. The fact is we don't always have the budget, so we have to kind of lay all of our ideas out and pick and choose. Hopefully at some point that will change, but I've had kind of both experiences.
I'd also say I think you're more successful if your business and technology groups are in line. What I find usually is it's us versus them. Business would not give requirements to technology. Technology wouldn't deliver. Once you cross that boundary, and if you actually have a team of business and technologists and they share the same idea, then the investment funding requests come coherently together, because then you'd have a business value, not just the cost. You're not just asking for money, you're just also saying that if you spend this money, you get XYZ out of it. That helps with the funding.
Yep.
One of the most challenging things I found was breaking habits. Like when you're trying to introduce new processes or build new organization and people are used to doing things a certain way, it's very difficult to convince them that this way is better and it's going to improve their productivity. So adoption and getting people on board is the challenge.
I think the one additional piece that I'll add in here is, I think one of the really big differences between entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship is that you have to do this within the context of an existing organization. And you can't do something that's completely revolutionary, that's totally and absolutely outside of the framework of the business. You have to be able to work within the business and understand what the constraints are within a business, what the budget constraints might be, or what the business alignment constraints are, and figure out a way to work within that, right? And there is a way to do it. You just have to figure that out.
So I think we will take one more question. Anyone? Okay, if there is no question, I just want to make recommendation this book. If you haven't written and if you have interest in innovation, how all the innovations out there happen, there is a good summary. It's a fun way of explaining history of innovation. It's written by Steven Johnson. So if you're interested, I recommend this book. Thank you. Thank you for attendance.